Employee was fired in front of the entire office. Then the undercover owner handed her a key. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Elena Martinez adjusted her monitor for the third time that morning. She had a ritual coffee first, then check emails, organize her desktop files, and dive into the endless sea of data that made Quantic Systems one of the most promising tech analytics firms in the city. While her colleagues chatted about weekend plans and office gossip, Elena preferred the company of spreadsheets and algorithms. Numbers didn't lie, didn't play favorites, and certainly didn't backstab you during lunch breaks. At 28, Elena had already earned a reputation as the most meticulous data analyst on the third floor. Her cubicle was a monument to organization: color-coded folders, perfectly aligned pens, and a small succulent plant that somehow thrived under artificial lighting. She wore simple blouses and kept her dark hair in a neat ponytail, preferring to blend into the background rather than attract attention. In a company where flashy presentations and loud voices seemed to determine career advancement, Elena's quiet competence often went unnoticed by the higher-ups. But the numbers always noticed her back. "Morning, Elena," chirped Sarah from the adjacent cubicle, her voice carrying that forced enthusiasm that came with Monday mornings. "Did you see the email about the quarterly review? Devon wants all department reports by Thursday." Elena nodded without looking up from her screen. Devon Klein, their department manager, had a way of making simple requests sound like life-or-death missions. She'd learned to translate his dramatic announcements into actual deadlines and deliverables, stripping away the unnecessary urgency he seemed to inject into everything. "I'll have mine ready by Wednesday," Elena replied, her fingers already dancing across the keyboard as she pulled up the client performance metrics. Quantic Systems had been growing rapidly over the past 2 years, expanding from a small startup to a mid-sized company with over 200 employees. The growth brought new opportunities, but it also brought new faces that Elena couldn't quite figure out. Like Marcus Klein, Devon's cousin, who had appeared in their department 3 months ago with a vague job title of Strategic Data Coordinator and an even vaguer set of responsibilities. Marcus occupied the corner office that used to belong to their previous senior analyst, Linda, who had mysteriously transferred to the Portland branch after raising questions about data inconsistencies. Elena remembered Linda's frustration during her last week, muttering about cooked books and family connections, but Linda had been tight-lipped about the details. Elena had assumed it was just office drama, the kind of drama she actively avoided. As the morning progressed, Elena immersed herself in the client reports, cross-referencing performance indicators with revenue projections. The data told stories of successful campaigns, struggling accounts, and emerging market trends. Elena had always been good at reading between the lines, finding patterns that others missed. It was a skill that had earned her quiet praise from clients, and occasionally a nod of approval from upper management. Around 10:30 she noticed him again. The janitor had been working the night shift for about a month now, but Elena often stayed late to finish projects, which meant their paths crossed more frequently than with other employees. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Unlike the previous cleaning crew, who rushed through their duties with barely a word to anyone, this man seemed to take his time. Elena had caught him lingering near the break room during late evening meetings, pushing his cart slowly past conference rooms where managers discussed quarterly projections. She'd seen him cleaning around the copy machines for an unusually long time, and once she'd noticed him emptying the trash near Devon's office while Devon was on a phone call with what sounded like an important client. "Excuse me, miss," the janitor said softly, approaching her cubicle with his cleaning supplies. "Mind if I empty this?" Elena looked up, surprised. The cleaning crew usually worked around them without much interaction. "Of course, Mr. Howard," he said, with a warm smile. "Call me Mr. Howard. You're Elena, right? I've heard good things about your work." Elena blinked in surprise. She couldn't remember the last time someone in the company had mentioned hearing good things about her work, especially not a janitor who worked nights. "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched. "I didn't realize anyone noticed." Mr. Howard chuckled as he replaced the liner in her small trash bin. "Oh, I notice quite a bit around here. Been doing this job long enough to know who really keeps a place running." He paused, his expression becoming slightly more serious. "Companies like this, they're built on people like you, the ones who care about getting it right, even when no one's watching. Something in his tone made Elena look at him more carefully. There was an intelligence in his eyes that seemed to contrast with his humble position. But before she could think more about it, he had moved on to the next cubicle, humming quietly to himself. The rest of the morning flew by in a blur of spreadsheets and client data. Elena was deep in a particularly complex analysis when Devan's voice boomed across the department. Team meeting in conference room B in 5 minutes. Everyone drop what you're doing. Elena saved her work and grabbed her notebook, joining the stream of employees heading toward the glass-walled conference room. Devan stood at the head of the table, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his blonde hair styled with the kind of precision that suggested he spent more time on his appearance than on actual work. Beside him sat Marcus, who seemed to perpetually wear a smirk that Elena found increasingly irritating. "Ladies and gentlemen," Devan began, his voice carrying that theatrical quality that made every announcement sound like a corporate TED Talk. "I've got exciting news. The quarterly review is going to showcase our department's exceptional performance, and I want everyone to understand their role in making this happen." He clicked to the first slide of his presentation, which displayed impressive-looking charts and graphs. Elena recognized some of the data. It was from accounts she'd been analyzing that morning. "Our client satisfaction scores are through the roof," Devan continued, gesturing dramatically at the screen. "Our efficiency metrics are beyond industry standards, and our strategic initiatives, led by Marcus here, are delivering unprecedented results." Elena frowned slightly. The numbers on the screen looked familiar, but something seemed off. The growth percentages were higher than what she'd calculated in her preliminary analysis, and some of the client satisfaction scores seemed inconsistent with the feedback reports she'd processed last week. "Now I need everyone to review their individual contributions and make sure they align with these department-wide achievements," Devan said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Elena, I'll need your detailed client analysis by tomorrow morning. Make sure it supports the narrative we're presenting to upper management." Elena nodded, but the phrase "supports the narrative" stuck in her mind like a splinter. Data didn't support narratives. Narratives either reflected data accurately, or they didn't. As the meeting dispersed, Elena lingered in the conference room, studying the presentation slides more carefully. She pulled out her phone and discreetly photographed a few of the charts, wanting to compare them with her own calculations back at her desk. "Something interesting?" Marcus asked, appearing beside her with that same smirk. "Just making sure I understand the metrics correctly," Elena replied diplomatically. "Oh, I wouldn't worry too much about the details," Marcus said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Devan and I have been working closely on these numbers. We've got everything under control." Elena nodded politely, but something in Marcus's tone set off alarm bells in her mind. She'd spent years learning to trust her instincts about data, and right now, those instincts were screaming that something wasn't adding up. Back at her desk, Elena pulled up her client analysis files and began comparing them with the presentation slides. The discrepancies became more apparent with each chart she examined. Client satisfaction scores had been rounded up significantly. Efficiency metrics included data from periods that weren't representative of current performance. And several unsuccessful campaigns had somehow been categorized as strategic learning opportunities rather than failures. Elena sat back in her chair, staring at the dual monitors displaying the conflicting information. She'd always prided herself on her integrity, on her commitment to accuracy regardless of whether the truth was convenient or not. But she'd also learned to pick her battles carefully in corporate environments. As she pondered her next move, she noticed Mr. Howard pushing his cleaning cart past her cubicle again. He paused near the copy machine, which was strange since he'd already cleaned that area earlier. For a moment their eyes met, and Elena could have sworn she saw understanding in his gaze, as if he knew exactly what kind of dilemma she was facing. The afternoon stretched on, and Elena found herself returning to the data discrepancies again and again. Each time she recalculated the numbers, the same conclusion emerged. Someone had been systematically inflating the department's performance metrics. The question was whether this was an honest mistake or something more deliberate. As 5 o'clock approached and her colleagues began packing up for the day, Elena made a decision. She would complete her analysis honestly, present the accurate data, and let Devan decide how to handle the discrepancies. It was the right thing to do, even if it meant challenging the narrative that Devan and Marcus had crafted. She worked late into the evening, double-checking her calculations and preparing a comprehensive report that included both the accurate data and a detailed explanation of where the discrepancies had originated. As she printed the final version, she noticed Mr. Howard making his rounds again, pushing his cart with that same methodical attention to detail she'd observed before. "Working late again, Elena?" he asked, pausing near her desk. "Just finishing up some analysis for tomorrow," she replied, looking up from her computer. "Sometimes it takes extra time to make sure everything is accurate." Mr. Howard nodded approvingly. "Accuracy is important, more important than most people realize." He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. "You know, in my experience, the people who care most about getting things right are often the ones who face the biggest challenges, but they're also the ones who make the biggest difference in the long run." Elena studied his face, struck again by the depth of understanding in his expression. "Have you worked in corporate environments before?" she asked. Mr. Howard's smile was enigmatic. "I've seen a lot of different sides of business over the years. Enough to know that integrity is rare and valuable." He resumed pushing his cart, then paused once more. "Whatever you're working on, Elena, trust your instincts. The truth has a way of surfacing, one way or another." As Elena watched him disappear around the corner, she felt a strange sense of reassurance. Tomorrow, she would present her findings to Devon, and let the chips fall where they may. She had no way of knowing that her commitment to accuracy was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change not just her own life, but the entire culture of Quantix systems. Little did she know that Mr. Howard's encouraging words carried more weight than she could possibly imagine, and that the janitor who seemed to notice everything was about to play a crucial role in the most dramatic day of her professional life. Elena arrived at the office Tuesday morning with a sense of purpose that felt both energizing and terrifying. Her honest analysis sat in a manila folder on her desk, waiting to be delivered to Devon. She'd spent most of the previous evening rehearsing how she would present the discrepancies, diplomatically, professionally, with solutions rather than just problems. But first, Devon had assigned her an additional task. "Elena," he'd said in his email that morning, "before our meeting, I need you to audit Marcus's client reports from the last quarter. Upper management wants a comprehensive review of all data before the quarterly presentation. Consider it a priority." Elena opened Marcus's files with the systematic approach she applied to all her work. At first glance, everything looked impressive. The Northfield Industries account showed a 47% increase in engagement metrics. The Carver Technologies project displayed remarkable efficiency gains. The Rodriguez Group campaign demonstrated cost savings that seemed almost too good to be true. And that's when Elena realized they probably were. She pulled up the raw data feeds from Northfield Industries and cross-referenced them with Marcus's report. The engagement metrics were indeed higher than the previous quarter, but only by 12%, not Marcus had somehow triple-counted certain interactions and included data from a different client entirely. Elena's heart began to race. This wasn't a simple mistake. The manipulation was too sophisticated, too deliberate. She dug deeper into the Carver Technologies project. Marcus claimed the client had achieved a 60% reduction in processing time using Quantix's new analytics dashboard. But when Elena accessed the actual client feedback surveys, she found a very different story. Carver Technologies had actually complained about system slowdowns and had threatened to cancel their contract twice during the quarter. The Rodriguez Group data was perhaps the most egregious. Marcus had reported cost savings of $230,000, but Elena discovered he'd simply moved failed campaign expenses to a different budget category labeled R&D investment. The actual performance had resulted in a $45,000 loss for the client. Elena sat back in her chair, staring at the screens filled with evidence of systematic data manipulation. Her hands were trembling slightly. This wasn't just about inflated numbers for a presentation. This was fraud. Clients were being misled about their campaign performance, and the company was building its reputation on fabricated success stories. She spent the next 3 hours documenting every discrepancy, creating a detailed analysis that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. The evidence was overwhelming, and Elena knew she had to act on it. At 2:30 p.m. she knocked on Devon's office door, both reports in hand. "Elena, perfect timing," Devon said without looking up from his computer. "I assume you have the audit results?" Please tell me everything looks good for tomorrow's presentation. Elena placed both folders on his desk. I have the audit results, and I'm afraid we have some serious problems. Devon's expression shifted from casual confidence to sharp attention. Problems? Elena opened Marcus's file and began explaining the discrepancies. With each revelation, Devon's face grew more rigid. But instead of the concern or gratitude Elena expected, she saw something that looked suspiciously like anger. These are serious accusations, Elena, Devon said when she finished. His voice was cold, controlled. You're essentially claiming that Marcus has been deliberately falsifying client data. I'm not making accusations, Elena replied carefully. I'm reporting what the data shows. The discrepancies are significant and consistent across multiple accounts. Devon stood up and walked to his window, his back to Elena. You know, Elena, in 3 years of managing this department, I've learned that there are 2 types of employees: those who understand the bigger picture and work toward team success, and those who get caught up in minor details and lose sight of our goals. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Devon, these aren't minor details. Clients are being misinformed about their campaign results. If what gets out? Devon spun around, his voice sharp. A new employee making careless errors that an overzealous analyst has blown out of proportion? These aren't careless errors, Elena insisted, her voice stronger than she felt. This is systematic manipulation of client data. Devon returned to his desk and closed both folders without looking at them. Elena, I'm going to give you some advice. In this business, we focus on positive outcomes and forward momentum. Getting bogged down in perfectionist nitpicking doesn't serve our clients or our company. Elena stared at him in disbelief. You're asking me to ignore evidence of data fraud. I'm asking you not to make waves over what are likely simple reporting inconsistencies, Devon replied, his tone final. Marcus is family, and he's learning. These things work themselves out. The word family hung in the air like a threat. Elena realized that Devon had no intention of investigating the discrepancies or correcting the false reports. He was protecting Marcus, regardless of the consequences. What about our clients? Elena asked quietly. Don't they deserve accurate information about their campaigns? Devon's smile was cold. Our clients deserve results, Elena. And results sometimes require creative interpretation of data. That's business. Eleni left Devon's office, feeling nauseated. She'd expected resistance, maybe even defensiveness, but she hadn't expected Devon to openly dismiss evidence of fraud. Back at her desk, she stared at her computer screen, trying to decide what to do next. That's when she remembered the internal audit system. Quantix had implemented an anonymous reporting tool 6 months ago, designed to allow employees to flag potential compliance issues without fear of retaliation. Elena had never used it, but she'd received the training emails like everyone else. After Devon left for his afternoon meeting, Elena accessed the audit portal. She uploaded her documentation, providing detailed evidence of the data manipulation and Devon's response to her findings. The system promised that reports would be reviewed by senior management within 48 hours. Elena felt a mixture of relief and terror as she submitted the report. She'd done the right thing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just painted a target on her back. As evening approached and the office emptied, Elena noticed Mr. Howard making his rounds again. He paused near her desk, his expression thoughtful. Long day? He asked gently. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak without revealing her emotional turmoil. Sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing, Mr. Howard said quietly. But it's always worth it in the end. Elena looked up at him, wondering how he seemed to know exactly what she needed to hear. I hope you're right. Mr. Howard's smile was warm and somehow reassuring. Trust me, Elena. Truth has a way of finding its way to the right people. As Elena gathered her things to leave, she had no idea that her anonymous report had already been flagged by the system, not for investigation, but for immediate notification to department management. Devon would know about her submission before she reached the parking garage. The trap was closing, and Elena was walking straight into. Friday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Elena had spent a restless night wondering if she'd made the right choice. But she arrived at work determined to focus on her regular duties while waiting for the audit response. She'd convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, senior management would take the evidence seriously and conduct a proper investigation. That illusion shattered at exactly 10:47 a.m. All hands meeting in the main conference room. Immediately, Devon's voice boomed across the department, with an urgency that made everyone look up from their screens. There was something different in his tone, a theatrical edge that Elena had never heard before. Sarah shot Elena a confused look. "Did you know about this meeting?" Elena shook her head, but her stomach was already churning. Something felt wrong. All hands meetings were usually scheduled in advance, and Devon looked like a man who'd been planning something all night. The main conference room buzzed with confused chatter as employees filed in. Elena took a seat near the back, hoping to remain inconspicuous. But she couldn't shake the feeling that invisible crosshairs were trained on her. Devon stood at the front of the room, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled, his eyes bright with what looked like barely contained excitement. Marcus sat in the front row, his typical smirk replaced by an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Was that sympathy or anticipation? "Ladies and gentlemen," Devon began, his voice carrying across the silent room like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "I've called this emergency meeting because we have a serious situation that affects the integrity of our entire department." Elena's blood turned to ice water. "Yesterday, I discovered that one of our team members has been spreading false accusations about our data integrity. Accusations that, if believed, could damage our reputation with clients and undermine the trust that senior management has placed in our department." Elena felt every eye in the room searching for the accused party. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but her heart was hammering so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. "These accusations," Devon continued, his voice rising with righteous indignation, "were made not through proper channels or collegial discussion, but through anonymous reporting systems. Cowardly, unprofessional, and completely baseless." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to stand up, to defend herself, to present the evidence that had convinced her to act. But Devon's carefully constructed narrative was already taking shape around her like a trap. "The employee in question has accused our newest team member Marcus of data manipulation. Marcus, who has brought fresh perspectives and innovative approaches to our analytics. Marcus, who has helped secure 3 major client renewals this quarter alone." A few employees nodded along with Devon's words. Elena recognized the reality unfolding before her. Devon was controlling the narrative before she even had a chance to speak. "Elena Martinez," Devon said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Please stand up." The conference room fell into absolute silence. Elena could feel 40 pairs of eyes turning toward her as she slowly stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. She'd imagined this moment differently. She'd thought she'd have time to prepare, to present her case professionally. Instead, she was being ambushed in front of her entire department. "Elena has violated our data protocol," Devon announced, his tone suggesting she'd committed corporate treason. "She has used internal systems to spread unsubstantiated accusations against a colleague. This behavior demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of team loyalty and professional conduct." "Devon, the data clearly shows," Elena began, her voice stronger than she'd expected. "The data shows exactly what it's supposed to show," Devon interrupted sharply. "Your interpretation of that data, however, reveals a concerning tendency toward paranoia and an inability to work collaboratively within established hierarchies." Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks. Around the room, her colleagues were studying their hands, their notebooks, anywhere but her face. Only Sarah met her eyes, looking stricken. "I followed proper protocol," Elena said, louder this time. "I brought my concerns to you first, and when you dismissed them, I used the anonymous reporting system exactly as we were trained to do." "You violated the chain of command," Devon shot back. "You demonstrated that you cannot be trusted to respect management decisions or work as part of a team." Marcus shifted in his seat, and for a moment, Elena thought she saw genuine discomfort cross his features. But he remained silent. "This kind of behavior is toxic to team morale," Devon continued, his voice building to a crescendo. "It creates an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust that undermines everything we're trying to accomplish here." Elena realized with growing horror that Devon wasn't just criticizing her. He was building towards something bigger. The theatrical nature of this meeting, the public setting, the careful construction of his argument. This was an execution. Therefore, Devon announced, his voice ringing with finality, effective immediately, Elena Martinez is terminated from her position at Quantix Systems. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Around the room she heard sharp intakes of breath, a few muffled gasps. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. "Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings," Devon continued, his tone now coldly professional. "Your access to company systems has been revoked, and you have 15 minutes to gather your things." Eleni stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. She'd expected pushback, maybe even disciplinary action, but she'd never imagined this level of public humiliation. Devon had turned her into an example, a cautionary tale about what happened to employees who challenged the established order. This is a lesson for all of us about the importance of respecting authority and maintaining team cohesion. Devon addressed the room while Elena remained standing like a deer caught in headlights. "We cannot allow individual ego or misguided righteousness to threaten our collective success." As Elena finally began moving toward the door, her legs feeling disconnected from her body, she caught sight of movement in the corner of the room. Mr. Howard stood near the back wall, apparently forgotten by everyone else in the drama of the moment. He wasn't cleaning or organizing, he was simply watching, his expression unreadable behind his wire-rimmed glasses. Their eyes met for a split second, and Elena saw something in his gaze that looked like anticipation? Not satisfaction at her downfall, but something else entirely. As if he was waiting for something to happen. Elena gathered her few personal belongings in a daze, her mind struggling to process the sudden destruction of her career. Her colleagues avoided eye contact as she packed her small succulent, her coffee mug, and the photo of her parents that sat beside her monitor. 3 years of dedicated work, reduced to a cardboard box that felt impossibly light in her hands. As she walked toward the elevator, Sarah appeared beside her. "Elena, I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "This is insane. Everyone knows you're the most honest person here." Elena managed a weak smile. "Take care of yourself, Sarah. And maybe start keeping copies of your own work." The elevator doors were closing when Elena heard footsteps approaching quickly across the lobby floor. She looked up to see Mr. Howard moving with surprising speed for a man his age, his cleaning cart abandoned near the conference room. But instead of saying goodbye or offering sympathy, Mr. Howard did something that would change everything. He removed his janitor's badge. Elena's finger hovered over the elevator button as Mr. Howard approached, but something in his purposeful stride made her hesitate. The man walking toward her didn't move like a janitor offering sympathy to a fired employee. He moved like someone with authority, with a destination in mind. "Wait," Mr. Howard said, his voice carrying a new quality Elena had never heard before, command. Elena stepped back from the elevator, as Mr. Howard turned around and walked with deliberate steps back toward the conference room. The main doors were still open, and Elena could see Devon inside basking in the aftermath of his performance, accepting nods of approval from employees who were too scared or too ambitious to question what they'd just witnessed. Mr. Howard stopped in the doorway and cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said loudly enough to cut through the murmur of conversation. "I need everyone's attention." Devon looked up with irritation. "Sir, this is a private company meeting. If you need to clean the room, you'll have to wait until we're finished." Mr. Howard reached into his pocket and pulled out a lanyard that Elena hadn't seen before. Even from across the lobby she could see it was different from the standard employee badges, sleeker with what looked like a gold emblem. "Actually, Mr. Klein," Mr. Howard said, his voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of executive authority, "I think we need to have a conversation." The transformation was startling. Gone was the humble janitor, who spoke softly and moved carefully around the edges of corporate life. In his place stood a man who commanded attention simply by entering a room. Elena found herself moving closer to the conference room door, drawn by the electric tension that was suddenly filling the air. Devon's expression shifted from irritation to confusion. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" Mr. Howard clipped the lanyard around his neck, and Elena could now see the name clearly. James Howard, Executive Partner, Quantix Systems. The conference room fell into absolute silence. "I'm James Howard," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Majority shareholder, and recently reinstated executive partner of Quantix Systems. And for the past month, I've been working undercover as part of your night cleaning crew. Elena felt her knees nearly buckle. The kind janitor who had offered her encouragement, who had seemed to understand her commitment to integrity, who had watched everything unfold with those intelligent eyes, he was the owner of the company. Devon's face had gone completely white. Mr. Howard, we had no idea. I mean, if you'd known I was watching, you would have behaved differently? James Howard interrupted, his eyebrows raised. That's exactly the problem, Mr. Klein. He stepped fully into the conference room, and Elena followed, her cardboard box forgotten. The employees who had been nodding along with Devon's narrative minutes earlier now looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. I've been working undercover for the past month, James continued, after receiving multiple anonymous complaints about corruption, favoritism, and data manipulation in this department. Complaints that senior management initially dismissed as disgruntled employee gossip. Elena's heart began to race. Her report hadn't been the first. Other people had tried to speak up, so I decided to investigate personally, James said, beginning to pace slowly in front of the room. Do you know what I discovered during my time as your janitor, Mr. Klein? Devon opened his mouth but no sound came out. I discovered that you've created a culture of fear and favoritism. I listened to conversations where you dismissed legitimate concerns about data accuracy. I watched you protect your cousin despite clear evidence of performance issues. And yesterday, I witnessed you threaten an employee for doing exactly what we train our staff to do, report potential compliance violations. James turned to address the entire room. I also discovered that Elena Martinez is one of the most dedicated and ethical employees this company has ever had. Her anonymous report contained detailed, accurate documentation of serious data irregularities, documentation that would have saved us from potential legal liability and client lawsuits. Elena felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. Mr. Klein, James said, turning back to Devon with the kind of cold authority that Elena had never heard before. In the past month you have failed every test of leadership, integrity and professional competence that I could devise. You've shown favoritism to family members regardless of performance. You've dismissed legitimate concerns about data accuracy. You've created a hostile work environment for employees who demonstrate the exact values this company was built on. Devon was now visibly trembling. Mr. Howard, please, you can explain why you just publicly fired our most ethical employee for reporting fraud. James's voice cut through Devon's attempted response like a knife. You can explain why you've been allowing falsified client reports to go to senior management. You can explain why you told Elena that results require creative interpretation of data. The room was so quiet, Elena could hear the air conditioning humming. Here's what's going to happen, James announced. Devon Klein, you're terminated immediately. Marcus Klein, your employment is also terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort both of you from the building, and you have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings. Devon's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Marcus, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke up. Uncle Devon told me the numbers were just estimates, he said desperately. I didn't know they were going to official reports. I was just doing what he asked me to do. Which is exactly why nepotism has no place in a professional environment, James replied coldly. He turned to face Elena, who was still standing in the doorway holding her cardboard box, trying to process the complete reversal of everything that had happened in the past hour. Elena, James said, his voice becoming warm again, I owe you an apology, and this company owes you far more than that. Elena set down her box and walked into the conference room, feeling like she was moving through a dream. You showed exactly the kind of courage and integrity that built this company, James continued. And I'm going to make sure that courage is properly rewarded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a sleek black key card. This is for you. Elena stared at the black key card in James Howard's outstretched hand, her mind struggling to process the dramatic shift from public humiliation to whatever this was. The card looked different from the standard employee access badges, thicker, with a subtle holographic strip and what appeared to be a higher security clearance level. I don't understand, Elena said softly, her voice barely audible in the stunned silence of the conference room. James smiled, and Elena recognized the same warmth she'd seen in Mr. Howard the janitor. now combined with the confidence of a man who owned the company. Elena, this keycard provides access to the newly established Ethics Oversight Office, an office that, as of this moment, reports directly to me and operates independently of all department management. Elena took the card with trembling fingers. It was heavier than she'd expected and warm from James's pocket. Ethics Oversight Office? A position I've been planning to create for months, James explained, his voice carrying across the room to the 40 stunned employees who were witnessing this unprecedented reversal of fortune. Recent events have convinced me that Quantix Systems needs a dedicated team focused on maintaining data integrity, investigating compliance concerns, and ensuring that employees feel safe reporting potential violations. Elena looked around the room at her former colleagues. Some looked amazed, others appeared relieved, and a few seemed genuinely excited by what they were hearing. Sarah was grinning widely, giving Elena an enthusiastic thumbs up. "Elena Martinez," James announced formally, "I'm offering you the position of Interim Director of Ethics Oversight, effective immediately." The words hit Elena like a physical force. Director of an entire office, reporting directly to the owner of the company. "But I'm just a data analyst," Elena protested, though her heart was racing with possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. "You're not just anything," James replied firmly. "You're someone who chose integrity over comfort. You're someone who risked your career to protect clients and maintain accurate data standards. You're someone who followed proper protocols even when your manager tried to intimidate you into silence." He turned to address the entire room again. Elena demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership this company needs. She saw a problem, documented it thoroughly, followed proper reporting procedures, and refused to be silenced when those in authority tried to suppress her findings. Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks, but it was no longer the heat of humiliation. It was something she'd rarely experienced in her professional life: recognition. Genuine, public acknowledgement of her values and her work. The Ethics Oversight Office will have full autonomy to investigate any concerns about data integrity, workplace conduct, or compliance violations. James continued. "Elena, you'll have the authority to form your own team, access any department's records, and report findings directly to senior management without interference from middle management." Elena's mind began to race with the implications. She could create the kind of transparent, integrity-focused environment she'd always wished existed at Quantix. She could ensure that other employees never faced the kind of intimidation and retaliation she'd just experienced. "What about the clients who received false reports?" Elena asked, her analytical mind immediately focusing on the practical implications. "The Rodriguez Group, Carver Technologies, Northfield Industries, they need to know their actual performance metrics." James nodded approvingly. "That will be your first priority as director. We'll be contacting all affected clients to provide corrected data and, where appropriate, financial compensation for any decisions they made based on inaccurate information." Elena felt a surge of satisfaction. The truth would finally reach the people who needed it most. "I'll also be assigning you a budget for staff and resources," James added. "I want you to build a team of people who share your commitment to accuracy and ethical conduct. People who understand that long-term success is built on trust, not manipulation." Elena looked down at the keycard in her hand, then back up at James. "Why me? You could hire someone with management experience, someone with a proven track record of running departments." "Because management experience without integrity is worthless," James replied immediately. "And because I've watched you work for the past month, I've seen how you approach problems, how you treat colleagues, how you handle pressure. You have something that can't be taught: genuine character." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Elena, I'm not going to lie to you. This won't be easy. You'll be investigating your former colleagues, making difficult decisions about policy violations, and probably facing resistance from people who prefer the old way of doing things." Elena thought about the past few days, the discovery of the fraud, Devon's dismissal of her concerns, the public humiliation she'd just endured. She thought about all the Lindas who had been transferred or pressured into silence. She thought about future employees who might face the same choice between integrity and career safety. "I accept," she said, her voice stronger than she'd heard it in days. The conference room erupted in applause. Not the polite obligatory clapping that usually followed corporate announcements, but but genuine enthusiastic approval. Sarah was actually cheering, and even employees Elena barely knew were smiling and nodding their support. James shook her hand formally, but his eyes held the same kindness she'd seen in Mr. Howard the janitor. "Welcome to your new office, Director Martinez. It's on the executive floor, corner suite with windows overlooking the city. I think you'll find it's quite different from your cubicle." Elena laughed, surprising herself. "Will I still be able to keep my succulent? I think we can arrange for significantly more advanced plant life," James replied with a grin. As the meeting dispersed and employees began filing out, many stopping to congratulate Elena or shake her hand, James approached her once more. "Elena, there's one more thing. The keycard you're holding doesn't just open your office door. It's programmed with executive-level access to every system, every database, every record in this company. When you're investigating compliance issues, you'll have complete transparency." Elena looked down at the card with new understanding. It wasn't just a key to an office, it was a key to the truth. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing in doing the right thing." James smiled. "Thank you for proving that integrity still exists in corporate America. Now, shall I show you to your new office?" 3 weeks later, Elena stood in her corner office on the executive floor, watching the sunrise paint the city skyline in shades of gold and amber. The space still felt surreal. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a mahogany desk that could seat 6 people, and yes, significantly more advanced plant life than her former succulent. A small fig tree now graced the corner, thriving under the natural light that her old cubicle had never seen. But the real transformation wasn't in Elena's office, it was in the entire culture of Quantix Systems. The Ethics Oversight Office had become the most talked about department in the company, and not because people feared it. Elena had deliberately designed the space to feel welcoming rather than intimidating. The main office featured comfortable seating areas, soft lighting, and a coffee station that had become an unofficial gathering spot for employees who wanted to discuss concerns in a relaxed environment. Elena had assembled her team carefully. Sarah had been her first hire, bringing her natural empathy and strong analytical skills to the role of ethics specialist. From the Portland branch, she'd recruited Linda, the former analyst who had been transferred after questioning Marcus's data. Linda had jumped at the chance to return to headquarters as senior compliance investigator, bringing with her a deep understanding of the systemic issues that had plagued the company. The team had also grown to include 2 new hires from outside the company: Michael Chen, a former internal auditor with a background in data forensics, and Dr. Priya Sharma, an organizational psychologist who specialized in workplace culture transformation. "Elena, you have a minute?" Sarah knocked on the open office door, holding a tablet and wearing the kind of satisfied expression that Elena had learned meant good news. "Always. What's the update?" Sarah settled into one of the comfortable chairs across from Elena's desk. "The quarterly culture survey results are in, and they're incredible. Employee satisfaction with management transparency is up 47%. Reports of feeling safe to voice concerns have increased by 62%. And here's the best part: voluntary turnover is down to its lowest level in company history." Elena smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried deeper satisfaction than any performance bonus ever could. "What about the client corrections?" "All affected clients have been contacted and provided with accurate data," Sarah replied, consulting her tablet. "The Rodriguez Group actually thanked us for our honesty and renewed their contract for another 2 years. Carver Technologies appreciated our transparency so much that they're referring 2 potential new clients to us." Elena nodded, remembering her conversation with James about the long-term value of trust over short-term manipulation. "Any new concerns this week?" 3 minor issues, all resolved through direct conversation. "No major compliance violations. Michael's data integrity training sessions are really working. People are catching potential problems before they become actual problems." The transformation had been remarkable to witness. In just 3 weeks, Elena had watched employees go from fearful silence to active engagement in maintaining ethical standards. The anonymous reporting system was still available, but it was being used less frequently because people felt comfortable approaching Elena's team directly. "Oh, and Marcus stopped by yesterday," Sarah added, her tone becoming more serious. Elena looked up with interest. Marcus had quietly resigned the day after Devin's termination, but Elena had wondered what had become of him. "He wanted to apologize," Sarah continued. He's enrolled in a data analytics certification program and asked if we'd consider giving him a reference once he completes it. He seems genuinely remorseful about what happened. Elena considered this. She'd learned that true ethics wasn't just about punishment, it was also about redemption and second chances for people willing to change. Set up a meeting, Elena decided. If he's serious about doing things the right way, we should give him the opportunity to prove it. As Sarah left to return to her work, Elena turned back to the window. The morning light was now streaming fully across the city, and she could see the building's parking garage where she'd stood just weeks ago, carrying a cardboard box and believing her career was over. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. James Howard stood in her doorway, looking remarkably similar to the humble janitor she'd first met, but wearing a perfectly tailored executive suit instead of maintenance coveralls. "Good morning, Director Martinez. Do you have time for the owner of the company?" Elena grinned. "I suppose I can fit you into my schedule." James entered and took the seat Sarah had just vacated. "I wanted to personally thank you for the client correction reports. The board was initially concerned about potential lawsuits, but the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Turns out honesty really is the best policy." "It usually is," Elena replied, "even when it doesn't feel like it at the time." James studied her thoughtfully. "Do you ever regret it? The choice you made that day when Devon dismissed your concerns?" Elena considered the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a data analyst in a cramped cubicle, overlooked and undervalued. Today, she was the director of a department that was actively transforming corporate culture, with the authority and resources to ensure that other employees never faced the intimidation she'd experienced. "Never," she said firmly. "Even if things had turned out differently, I would have regretted staying silent more than I could have regretted speaking up." James smiled with genuine warmth. "That's exactly why this company needed you in leadership." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Elena, companies don't fail because of mistakes. They fail because no one dares to tell the truth. You dared, and because of that, Quantix Systems is stronger, more honest and more successful than it's ever been." After James left, Elena returned to her window, but this time she picked up the black keycard from her desk. The same card that had once seemed so impossible, so beyond her reach. She turned it over in her hands, remembering the weight of it that first day, the feck of trust and authority it represented. She placed the keycard back on her desk, not hidden away in a drawer, not clutched defensively in her hand, but simply resting in plain sight. A reminder that integrity, once revealed, didn't need to hide. Elena Martinez was no longer afraid to be seen. Outside her window, the city bustled with morning energy, full of people heading to jobs where they might face their own moments of truth. Elena hoped that somewhere among them, someone would find the courage to speak up, to challenge corruption, to choose integrity over comfort. Because now she knew beyond any doubt that the truth always finds its way to the right people, even if sometimes it takes a janitor to deliver it.